Hey, what's up, guys? It's Jason Dutch with Dig on America. So just want to do a just a short video here on guns, and I'm gonna probably talk pretty quick here, um, despite my pause, because there's some ideas that I think um, need to be talked about here. Um, Obviously, this debate is in the news again, constantly. Every year or so, 6 months or so, comes back up. Um, you know, actors and you know that sort of thing will jump in on this, like um, sorry, like Matthew McConaughey did yesterday, and then people accuse him of grandstanding, blah 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 blah. So I just want to kind of give my thoughts on this whole conversation, um, and I think it makes sense to start at the beginning, okay, with the signing of the Constitution of the United States. So I'll talk a bit about gun culture and stuff like that in a minute, and my issues with that, and some of the other stuff. But I'm going to try to keep this to about 12 minutes or so tops. Okay, so bear with me, and I'll get to any comments at the end if there are any. Uh, the the Constitution of the United States. Um, most of us will start looking at the gun conversation with the Second Amendment. I think that is a backwards way to look at it, because that is not the order in which it was written. Okay. So the reality of the conversation is that Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution is where this conversation begins, specifically about halfway through. So Article 1, Section 8 basically talks about the powers of Congress to collect taxes, pay debts, borrow money, regulate commerce, you know, that sort of thing. Establish post office and roads, blah blah blah. Uh, so about halfway through, it starts to lay out the following, and I'm going to read directly. Um, to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations. To declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water. To raise and support armies, comma, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for longer term than 2 years. Yes, it's clear that the framers of the Constitution did not really see the need for a permanent standing army at the time. They were more interested in, state militias. Okay, uh, but they were informed in favor of a navy, and we can prove that because the next sentence is to provide and maintain a navy. There was nothing after the semicolon there, right? About the money or the term. It continues again, Article 1, Section 8, to make rules for the government and regulation of the naval forces, to provide for the calling forth of the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Semicolon. To provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining, comma, the militia, comma, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. So, what does this say to us? It says that they don't really they don't really see the need for a standing army. They do see the need to protect our borders over water with the Navy. Um, they want the power to be able to call forth the militia, which implies that there therefore needs to be an authority of the federal government over any militia. Okay. It says specifically for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States. And then reserves to the states, respectively, the appointment of the officers. So there's a structure, there's an implied, and not only implied, but really laid out hierarchy here. There's a system. They have a system in place. Of course, we have the National Guards now, right? So this kind of fits that need. But what were they calling them forth for again? To execute the laws of the Union, whatever laws are on the books at that moment would be the laws of the Union. Whether it was, established slavery at the time, Jim Crow laws, or the laws that we have today, right? Suppress insurrections and repel invasions. Now, insurrections would be internal, like we saw on January 6th, and repel invasions would be external. Nowhere in here did it talk about a tyrannical government. It is not mentioned. Now, we do know that the framers of the Constitution were worried about too much government power because of their experiences with oppression by the crown of England, right? So, and again, to reiterate, they talk about organizing, arming, and disciplining. So there is a clear intention for a structure here. So that wasn't enough, obviously, for the colonies, the states at the time. So they wanted more. They wanted a Bill of Rights, and they were promised a Bill of Rights if they ratified the Constitution. If you look at history, that's the way that it took place. They had the Federalist Papers and everything that sort of gave the argument for a stronger central government because the Articles of Confederation had been so weak. And Hamilton was really at the center of that. So then the Bill of Rights gave us 10 amendments, one of which was the Second Amendment. And now we'll read that. A well-regulated militia, capitalized militia, same as in Article 1, Section 8, comma, being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, comma, shall not be infringed, period. So what can you look at this as saying? Well, they've already laid out, like we talked about before, that a militia should be regulated, trained, appointed by the officers of which appointed by the state, and could be called into service to help repel invasions, insurrections, etc., from whether foreign or domestic. But again, not necessarily against the government itself. You can maybe make a plausible argument that could be what they were thinking based on other parts of the Constitution. And I'm not really interested in that fight because there's a plausible read if you read the whole body of the text. And I don't want to cherry pick, right? So, so it's so we know that, but we do know that they wanted it to be there to be a system in place for this capitalized word militia. Again, being necessary for the security of a free state. What does security mean? Well, we can imply that it went back to Article 1, Section 8 again to defend against insurrections, etc. Okay. The right of the people, and they say in other texts, the whole people, everyone, to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The interesting part about this is that people usually only cite the second half, right? Like there's not a different sentence here. And in the Heller case, they separated these two. So talk about that briefly in a second. But I'm just trying to get down to the bottom of like where I stand on this. And I am a gun owner. So, I do see a point. I see an interesting case to own weapons. But the Constitution did not lay out specifically or really even imply that you yourself are you can have a gun to hunt or things like that. Now, in those days, there were certain people who maybe needed to have weapons. If you were a pioneer, obviously you're not going to go out into the wilderness without a gun. But oftentimes they were actually not on what would be considered U.S. soil at the time. They were, there was treaties and stuff in place where we were kind of working with and while we were eradicating these Native American tribes. But you had to be defended against them because they're the threat to you and not the other way around, which was absurd as we look back with 2020 vision in hindsight. But you had bears and mountain lions and coyotes, right? So it makes sense. You have to be able to shoot food. I get that part, but it really wasn't like something necessary to the life of someone living in New York or in Virginia, which was the main population center at that time. But the states were big on their own states' rights at those times. They wanted, the slave states wanted to be able to have slaves. They didn't want the crazy northern states to come in and take away their right to own people as property. So they wanted to be able to defend their integrity from the northern states. So you almost have a stronger argument towards self-defense in the Fourth Amendment, which says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. You almost have a stronger argument there than you do in the Second Amendment towards the right to keep and bear arms in your home as a method of self-defense. But even that one kind of falls short because while it does say, hey, you have the people have the right to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. And one would agree that someone breaking into your house would be unreasonable. But it doesn't say in there you have the right to defend yourselves against those things with physical harm. It more implies the ability to sue for your constitutional rights if that happens to you. So that one kind of falls short of whatever scrutiny I would put on that as well. So I'll talk for a minute about gun culture, because this all boils down to like gun culture, right? And I'll try to wrap this up in about 5 minutes from now. Obviously I talked about the Heller case briefly, but like the Heller case changed, there had been like a 75-year period where the Supreme Court hadn't really touched guns. For most of that time, there had been semi-automatic weapons without much debate on whether or not they should be regulated. And we didn't really have, at least up until the 90s, we didn't really have a lot of mass shootings in places like hospitals, schools, churches, etc. Very, very few and far between. Really anything that we had was gang or mob related. Which brings into the question of, law-abiding citizen, which I'll get to in a minute too. But Heller basically was a case where a off-duty or a police officer, I forget if he was if he was active or not, registered for a handgun permit in Washington, D.C. and couldn't get it and sued. And there was other people in that case as well. They wanted a black female to be who wanted to protect herself from her dangerous neighborhood, to be the face of that, of course, with the Cato Institute, when they took this to court, by the way, which the NRA did not choose to be a part of at the time, oddly enough. So, the Heller case basically said that the first part implies that you don't have to be a part of a militia to still have the individual right, but they kind of just grabbed that from nowhere. To my eye, you can disagree with that, and it was separate from the second part, right? So they even argued that that right existed before the Constitution was ratified, or the Bill of Rights was ratified. So you've got this change to judicial precedent that took place at that time in 2008. That kind of led to gun culture, because like you've now got this problem where men are using guns as a proxy for their penis. You have a lot of different things that folks on the right will say. They will say, more guns equal more peace. They will say more, armed teachers. They'll say good guy with a gun. I need to protect myself against a tyrannical government. But and look, I'm not shitting on people here. I'm just raising questions. So let's look at tyrannical government. What is tyrannical? Well, in the eyes of the framers of the Constitution, tyrannical would be a government, which, by the way, again, as we have said, the word tyrannical does not appear in Article 1, Section 8, nor does it appear in the Second Amendment, this idea of a tyrannical government. As I said, there are places within the Constitution where they do imply such things. But you have different ideas. There's spectrum to what people think is tyrannical. There are people who think CRT is tyrannical. There are people who think that abortion is tyrannical, pro or against. There are people who think that teachers teaching quote unquote socialism is tyrannical. There are people who think that Biden just being being president, or the Trump by being president, could be tyrannical, right? And none of those ideas would really hold up to what the framers, I think, would have thought of as tyrannical. They would have thought of tyrannical as a government coming and taking your shit, which is what they literally wrote other amendments for in the Bill of Rights and within the body of the original Constitution to protect us from. So to amalgamate the Second Amendment with that, I think is a stretch. Okay. But we have to look at, like, what do people look at as a threat? Because if someone believes that, an attack on their religion is therefore a threat to the nation, then they think they're justified in taking up arms against what they look at as that threat. So, it's the ambiguity kind of kills us here. Like, I wish the framers would have written what they meant. They didn't even do that really when it came to slavery. They danced around it. Other persons, but then you have, but this gun culture issue is like, you wonder why people have, if you can't marry the phrase "a gun is a tool" or a gun, guns don't kill people, people kill people. You can't really marry that well, to my eye, to what is portrayed by gun culture, because if a gun is a tool, why am I not taking a picture with my screwdriver? Why are guns such a unique tool that I want to, get my family around the Christmas tree and hold up our guns? We don't do that with other things. We don't do that with other tools. It's unique to a gun. And what does that say? It basically says, hey, I got power. Come take it. I'm ready for you. I'm ready for the fight. I'm ready to kill. I'm ready to fight. If I were to take a picture on my Facebook photo of like this, that's a clear message. I'm displaying a fighting posture, saying, let's do it. I'm ready to go. You want to come at me? I'm at least ready to fight. I don't really see a difference between that and posing like this with your rifle. And then you wonder where some of these men's because it's almost always men. It's basically a male issue when it comes to mass shootings. Really, almost all shootings. It's especially mass shootings of more than one person. It's almost always men. So you really can be fair in saying it's a man issue, and a lot of it, I think, comes down to mass. That guns are a proxy for, again, penis, masculinity. To me, being a man is about having integrity and honor and protecting those who can't protect themselves, not looking to say, "Hey, look at me! I'm Iron Man with my bulletproof vest and my gun." You know, and again, this is from a guy who owns guns. So I've gone longer than I said I would, but I'm still not really done. So I lied. So this is a unique issue when it comes to men. Now, I just talked about a lot of this on Delvin Cox's show, but I didn't get a chance to elaborate on a lot of stuff that I kind of want to talk about. So I did take a couple of quick notes here. It's the cultural. So when you look at the fact that since Heller, and really since before Heller, since the 80s, maybe early 90s, you've had more of these mass shootings. I think that does come from the gun culture, and the gun culture again comes from this idea that people are like posing with guns and making a gun part of their identity. Okay. Where again, it's unique. I'm not taking a picture with a drill. So it doesn't to me look like it's about freedom. It looks like it's about this fake masculinity. So we all have the same Second Amendment right. The whole people have the same Second Amendment right, but it doesn't really have anything to do, again, with defense. I don't see how you can get to that from anything that was written in Article 1, Section 8 or in the Second Amendment. Defense of your home specifically. Like I said, I think you have a better argument in the Fourth Amendment than you do in the Second. So when you look at the purposes that it was put there for, like I read earlier in this podcast, I'm not sure that those arguments hold up. Law-abiding citizens having guns, good guy with a gun conversation, like you are literally law-abiding until you are not. So let's say that the government decided to reinstitute slavery tomorrow. Let's just say that was the case. And I take up arms against that. Now, I may be in the moral right, but I am literally not law-abiding when I go against the law that says we now can have slavery again. And if I stay law-abiding, I am doing so literally by not picking up my gun. Because it is until I pick up my gun that I remain law-abiding. So, now the good guy with a gun conversation is slightly different, because you could make an argument that, okay, the good guy would stand up against slavery, but that's not ever what it's brought up for. It's brought up for like, oh, I see a bank robbery in place, so I get to play superhero and, go in and save the day. Because I have equal power to the criminal. Though there's issues with that as well, right? Like, just because I have a gun without proper training doesn't mean that I'm not going to hit an innocent bystander, or that criminal could take the gun from me. Now he has two guns, or, maybe I hit him with the first shot and I am the hero, but there's a spectrum of different things that can happen. And we don't have proper gun training just to own a gun in this country. You do kind of need it to get a concealed carry in a lot of cases. But that's not necessarily even in those cases, a one-day course does not necessarily mean well trained. Um, so again, I'm just throwing ideas out here, right? Like I'm not trying to like MF anybody here, but you know, another argument I'll get is like, the arm the teachers thing. Um, teachers are people. I could have sworn that a month ago, teachers were anti-American socialists pushing CRT down our throats, and we're a danger to our kids. Now we want to arm them. That's odd. But anyway, um, so teachers are people. Like, kid could steal a gun from a teacher. The kid could, a teacher could break up with his wife. His wife could leave him, and now he's in a depressed mental state. But you can't do anything about mental health in this country because you've got, you don't have, we can't even get universal health care. We can't even get single payer health care passed. So how are we supposed to fix a mental health issue when we can't even make sure that people are covered to be able to regulate their mental health? And that is a conversation we need to have. We can't, you've got 85 to 90% of Americans who agree that there should be some sort of mental health check with guns. Even Republicans overwhelmingly support this. But we can't get it done because you have 50, 51, 52 people in the Senate who are beholden to the NRA more so than they are to the people they represent because of the gun lobbies. When you're getting $3 to $13 million from the NRA, you are literally listening to the money in politics before you are listening to the people who you are supposed to represent. So if we can't get money out of politics, then we are not going to solve the single payer healthcare program and make sure everybody has healthcare, whether it's private, public, or not, right? Like literally, people don't have access to healthcare, especially when it comes to mental health, because you just can't walk into, an emergency room and say, "I'm feeling depressed, fix me." You got to go to the appropriate arms for that, the appropriate branches of the medical system for that, and people are afraid to do that because they're afraid they might get institutionalized, one, or two, have to pay for it, because a psychologist isn't just going to see you for free, right? So if we can't get money out of politics, we can't get single, healthcare coverage, which means we can't fix the mental health problem, which means we're going to continue to have a gun issue and people who are able to be swayed by gun culture because they were bullied or something like that. And I think that, I can understand. I was bullied as a kid, right? Like, I can understand. There were times when I thought, man, I'd love to come to school the next day and punch the heck out of Joe Schmo. And there's a spectrum of thought within the people that are bullied. And some of them, once in a while, will grab daddy's gun out of the gun locker and use it. So, that is a mental health issue because, yeah, you can try to stop the bullying or, but on the other hand, who is the person who's bullied supposed to talk to? We shame people for talking about being bullied. And that's a separate issue, but it's a sad issue, right? And people who are neglected by society have a higher propensity to get involved with groups, be it like a street gang or a skinhead gang. There's skinheads recruit social outcasts on purpose. And they have been doing this for a long time. They'll build, oh, you know what? I know you're downtrodden, but it's because of the blacks. It's because of the Jews, right? Like, this is a literal skinhead recruiting technique. You're a big Aryan guy, like, you have worth, value, etc. And again, you have this issues with other demographics as well. We all know that there's police issues in this country. So is a guy who recruits a kid into a street gang, telling the truth about police and justice, but then using that to get a kid to sell drugs to someone, and then now that kid needs to have a gun to protect himself from the other drug dealer. Then that's a disingenuous way to market that to that kid and bring them into a lifestyle that they shouldn't be in. So anyway, and last but not least, this a religious argument with Jesus. Jesus understood the right to bear arms. He understood the right of self-defense. They are referring to Jesus telling his disciples in the New Testament to bring their swords. But it even says there that he is fulfilling the prophecy, because the prophecy was that Jesus would be labeled basically an insurrectionist. And in order to be labeled an insurrectionist under Roman law, one must be congregated in a group of 3 or more, where at least 2 were armed with swords. So that is the reason why Jesus, if you believe in the prophecy of the Bible being true, that is the reason why Jesus said, hey, we never bring weapons with us, but on this day, we're gonna break tradition and we're gonna bring swords with us. Not because I believe in the power of self-defense, but because I need to fulfill this prophecy that we are viewed as insurrectionists under Roman law. So your argument doesn't hold up with Jesus being in favor of arms either. So again, I'm not saying all this is an if you're a gun owner, you're a piece of shit thing, because I'd be talking about myself. I'm just throwing ideas out there. I'll get to the chat right now. I'll read 2 or 3 comments. Oh no, here we go again. We had shootings in the 80s. Yes, we did. Thank you for the comments. Lamar, Jartan, Vic Stryker, Flow State. I disagree that mass shootings are a product of the look how tough I am compensation culture, though. Well, then you have to give me an argument on the other side, because the statistics disagree with you. You didn't have mass shootings like this prior to gun culture. Show them to me if we did. And I'm not talking about like I'm not talking about like crime related stuff. I'm talking, because that stuff has always been there. Like I said earlier in the podcast, we had issues in the 1920s with like Al Capone and stuff, which of course we romanticize now. But and that what led to harsher gun laws, which stood up until 2008. I think we removed gun-free zones designations from schools, and they wouldn't be such obvious targets. I've already covered that. So that being said, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks for watching the show. I won't be on tonight because the wife's out of town, but we will have candidate Jason Call from Washington on, and Haas and Anna and Mikey will hold down the fort. Tim Bristol will be joining the show tonight in my stead to do the dig on inflation. And I'll be back on the show next week with another candidate interview with Francine Lai. So thanks for everybody for tuning in. Please share this show, support the show if you can. Tell someone about us. Like, subscribe, follow us on Twitch, twitch.tv/Dig on America. Check us out on one of the podcast apps and listen to the show as you drive. So thank you for your support. See you guys later, and stay safe.